Evening, everybody. Hope you're all well. Yeah, weather's been a bit on the shitty side, hasn't it, to say the least. Wind's been absolutely horrendous, but there we are. Actually managed to, I've had a couple of days off, decided to take the wife out, which has been quite nice. And yeah, you'd think I'd be looking quite refreshed, but unfortunately I had a bit too much wine and cocktails last night. So I've had to piece myself together for this one. So yeah, not too much to be on with this week. To be honest, I'm planning on trying to work through. It didn't quite pan out like that last week. So yeah, trying to work through the back sort of catalogue of questions we've got stored up. I was just having a read through before we come live on air, and yeah. Let's see what we've got in there. So please feel free to fire in any new questions that you've got. Last week was very, very, very food orientated, so it would be great to try and get on some other different topics. If you've got something in mind out there, we'll give anything a crack. But yeah, other than that, there's not really much to report other than the Go-Sanke event together with exclusively Koi and Mr. Lee Hadfield went exceptionally well. I think there's just 10 tickets remaining now from that, so we pretty much had over the course of the weekend release 40 of them sold out, which has been awesome. I do very appreciate the support with that one, and yeah, really hoping to make this a super event and the sort of foundation and building block for more things we want to do moving forward. So I'm actually off to see the venue tomorrow for the last bits of sort of planning to see where everything's going to go and everything's going to fit. And yeah, hopefully it's going to serve the purpose, say, moving forwards for some other stuff. So yeah, happy days. So yeah, please don't forget, fire any questions in, and we'll sort of get cracking with some of the older ones that we've got stored up. I'll tell you what, we'll start with ones just come in first this evening. So Sam, question. Eric, he thought this would make a good little bit of conversation. Can you name some Koi varieties and tell us who is the best breeder of them and why? Right, Sam, rather than me name them, everybody tuned in, why don't you drop me some varieties in that you would like to know, yeah, the best breeders, and I'll go into, well, which are the best breeders and varieties and why. So fire that into the comments, and I'll pick up on that in 5 or 10 minutes when we've worked through some other questions. Secondary he, Shirley Gibson, secondary he caused by breeding or something else? That is an interesting one. Secondary he, there's loads of causes for it, to be honest with you. I've seen how it can just react to foods. You know, certain types of color enhancers. I've seen this a lot with shrimp, actually, sort of things heavily laced in that type of carotenoid or color enhancer, and yeah, I mean that can really push it out genetically. So in Shirotsuori, for example, the Omasako Shirotsuori, I don't know if people watching will know this. So the reason Omasako Shiros have the body type they have, and they're the true jumbo growing Shirotsuori, was that way back in the lineage a Showa was introduced. And then you can imagine there you're introducing, you know, the sort of beni into the mix there, and that had to be bred back out, but it is still sort of in the genetic pool a little bit, so that can tend to throw it there. So yeah, you know, the factors, and I've seen as well, you know, water, different types of water can just encourage it, as well as diet, genetics. There's a whole mix of stuff in there, and it's yeah, problematic. Although I would say I sort of see less and less of it these days, but when I do tend to see it, you see it in one place a lot, and then you start to think that must be something of what I've just mentioned that's sort of triggering it and pushing it there. So I hope that helps. Right, just bear with me while I dig back into the archives, and please, I've seen you've dropped plenty of varieties in, so we'll pick up that in a minute. The wife's also, I think she's at home, wrapped up on the sofa. We're in a bit of a state, pair of us last night. It's good fun. Right, here we go. So what are the main things to look for when buying single colour koi, and is it better to buy them darker or lighter when smaller? I'm not sure if I've answered this before, but it's still in there, so we'll go with it anyway. As a general rule of thumb, and this applies to a lot of varieties, to be honest with you, a lot darken with age. So the big thing here is going to be to buy them lighter, because naturally they will darken. So if we're talking, Karashigoi here, naturally the lighter ones do tend to darken through. Benigoi, they can be a bit different. Benigoi's colour will really change a lot depending on male and female. But again, naturally, the pigmentation strengthens and becomes deeper with age as well. And I think that's even through, if we throw like Asagi into the mix, they're a big one. They naturally darken because of all the sumi that's actually sat within them. So always better to buy them lighter. Yeah, just in general, it's a good rule of thumb, and always not to go in too finished. It's always an interesting topic, that, because it can get very, very confusing. But even like with sumi, you can. A lot of quality generally takes time to progress, and that applies with sumi as well. You know, in the best sumi, it takes time, but there can be, in certain lineages and certain instances, sumi that does actually come through is there, you know, at sort of Tosai Nisai of quality that still becomes even better with age, but it's all up on the body. So always try to not generalize too much, because there's always more to it than that. But in general, yes. I've always sort of told people, especially when picking younger fish, the uglier younger fish make the prettier bigger fish, and then flip that vice versa, which can be that the prettier small fish tend to make the uglier big fish. It's a very broad generalization, but it's one that can help just get your head around, you know, looking for potential in younger fish rather than what's there that can tend to be a lack of quality. Good question, that one. Just bear with me, folks. Oh, there we go. What are your thoughts on the Hajiro variety? Absolutely love it, to be honest with you. It's just finding real, true Hajiro is really hard work. But when you get one that looks good and looks the business, I don't think you can beat it, to be honest with you. I know, when you've got a dark pond, people can't understand having a variety like that, but the white tip finish on them does look superb. And we get them, the Akahajiro as well, the red type. I mean, I've got a few of them from the Dainichi Benigoi batch, and they just look out of this world. So, pretty keen on them. But they are a real rare beast, and something even more fascinating I took a punt on that I've actually got swimming around at the facility at the minute is Deutz Karasugoi, the completely black, no white tips, everything black and Deutz, and these ones have actually got red bellies. And to be honest, me and Chris think they're pretty awesome, but we're yet to really see people, share the same opinion on that, shall we say. But probably just need to expose, and probably when we get back to running the auctions, we'll probably slip one or two of them in there and see what you guys think to them. But I think they're pretty cool, and especially if you've got a window pond with the red bellies as well. I think that's going to be, very, very interesting and pretty impressive to see, to be honest. So, great variety. Right, just bear with me. There we go. I keep my koi in a greenhouse. It's very hot and bright. What is the hottest water temperature koi can be kept in? Increased ventilation and aeration, but on a sunny day, water temp is still 24°C. So this must be a really old one, probably from back in the summer. But if you're getting 24°C, that is the holy grail. If you're looking to raise your fish, 24, 25 is that real optimum, especially if you're bringing on Tosai Nisai. That you want to be at, and you'll keep koi. That is, you've got the immune system working at its best, the filtration, everything will be working absolutely flat out, and superbly well at that point. So don't be worried about that. If we're talking about maximums, I've had the water during the hottest times as high as 32. Sort of heat wave this summer was crazy times. They will still live in that kind of temperature, but then you're getting some real drawbacks. I had to stop feeding because at that kind of water temperatures, the problem we've got is even if you get 100% saturation of oxygen, the actual amount of oxygen in milligrams per liter is very low, and energy levels really do dip off to the point where there's not the energy really there for digestion properly, and the appetite does succumb because the fish just haven't got the energy for it. So it's also at them extreme temperatures going to have a massive impact on coloration as well. It's really not ideal, but in a greenhouse, especially the bigger ones, it's hard to bring that down and control it, to be honest. So if you're hitting the 24, and to be honest, my normal sort of average summer temperatures in mine are about 27, 28. And again, I would prefer it a bit lower, but we can really work with that temperature. But when you go beyond it, sort of hit that 30 and above, you've really got to be on guard and say we had to stop feeding. The problem with that then as well is, although, they are conserving energy a little bit, but the speed at which weight can drop off them as well, and then you're not feeding, it's a real hellish sort of temperature to be at. So, better to cool it if possible. And you need every technique to get as much oxygen in the water as possible. It's like I say, even at 100% saturation, the actual amount of oxygen is quite low. So, but greenhouses are a great way to get that free heat. If you're out there, you're not wanting to pay the costs for heating, even in summer. Then if there is a way, you can practically work around a small greenhouse over the pond or something like that. I know that's not going to be for a lot of people, be ruining the gardens, and no doubt there'll be plenty of angry missuses if all these koi keepers start whacking greenhouses up in the garden. But amazing way to get that free heat over the summer period and really maximize what you're doing with the growth. And if you're building a new pond, that might be something you consider factoring into it, is building it in that type of way. Because say for me personally, if I was having to heat all through the summer, the costs it would add overall would be astronomical. The only drawback with it is I don't have control, let's say, over the heat, certainly at the top end. But overall in the UK, it keeps fairly decent. And let's say in the smaller greenhouse, I know from having them in the past, they do tend to keep a bit more stable around that sort of 22, 24 degrees sort of heat. Right, let's dive into some of the variety questions. Let's see who's up at the top. So Adrian first, then tancho. So breeders for tancho. Now, I do quite openly tell people all the time, I'm not a massive tancho fan. I think for me, the sort of thing with tanchos wore off quite a while ago. However, there are a few instances where that completely bucks the rule. One being Dainichi tends to have a couple of tanchos normally kicking around in the back pond in the main fish house. These things are anywhere between 90 cm and a meter, and they absolutely blow my mind every time I see them. Absolutely superb. I think for me, with it just being about the red spot on the head, it's important that all the other qualities come through. So some size, body power, and all the rest of it. So then you look into who does that best with Kohaku, basically, and or the other tancho varieties, if it is in this particular instance talking about tancho Kohaku. So Dainichi, amazing. Sakai equally has these impressive, absolute monsters that are just mind-blowing. And other than that, Hoshikin is an absolute master with the tanchos. He probably has more of them on any given time than anybody else I know of quality that also get the impressive size and body to them as well. So, I think, the Dainichi ones are hard. I've been, ever since I've seen that big one, it's sort of implanted that dream and vision in my head of having a big tancho like that. And I've been playing now for the past couple of years on trying to get it from sort of Tosai onwards. Had one in Japan from a particular lineage that I knew could deliver as well, parent set, and that failed. But a lot of them this year, all of which sort of failed. So it really has driven me crazy, this one. And it's quite hard to attain that dream from a Dainichi or a Sakai. So I think for the general sort of purposes of the mass market and accessibility, Hoshikin's probably the one that stands above everybody for me on that variety. Richard, Ginrin Kohaku. Yeah, I mean, straight away you mentioned Ginrin Kohaku, Momotaro springs to mind. They have been the people that's revolutionized that variety. Ginrin, typically you're not the best growing variety out there. And then Momotaro's come and just smashed up the rule book with that one. And yeah, still to this day, I mean, on my last trip, I supplied an absolute worldie of one, which you'll be able to see on the Ricky Stoddart and Kigoi page on Facebook if you have a look. Absolutely top draw. I think it was Sanzai 71 cm. Absolutely mind-blowing. Bigger than your normal Go-Sanke varieties, Sanzai at that kind of size. So super, super impressive what they've done for that variety. And then there's others been built on the back of it. I'm a big fan of them from Taniguchi as well, which I do believe he's used Momotaro parents in his lineage. And it is a variety that's cropping up more and more now, people are producing. But probably for me, those are the two standout ones. And I know there's another particular one from Taniguchi in circulation. It was a first prize winner at the ZNA this year. And he is pretty strong with that variety. So, and I probably need to mention Hiroi as well, because Hiroi across Ginrin in general is probably the strongest if you're coupling Ginrin Showa, Kohaku, and Sanke, all three of which he produces. And yeah, I mean, probably strongest there with Ginrin Showa, but he does all three of them exceptionally well. So hats off to him for that one. But yeah, champion Momotaro on that one for sure. Skeggy, how we doing? Asagi, yes. Straight away, no doubt, we've got Otsuka and we've got Oya, two champions of that variety by a country mile. Actually, both farms are located right next to each other, which is I always find interesting. But two very different styles of Asagi as well. The thing I love with the Otsuka type is it's known as the Mombei lineage. That's how Otsuka's known amongst the Japanese. And yeah, they've got this very unique face, which is such a strong trait that you can pick it out as soon as you sort of accustomed to it. You could pick that out 9 times out of 10 when you've got one of his Asagis without knowing it's come from him. Very sort of long face, huge mouth, and they get them sort of chubby cheeks forming as well. And yeah, it's got a very bullish look to it, and it's just superb with them. I actually managed to get the number one Sanzai Asagi from him this year, which has been being entered into the All Japan. Super fish. But yeah, I was there when them fish come back from that harvest, and that was amazing to see the quality of them. And yeah, it's actually something, it's a trait that's that strong. He's used that Asagi DNA across all the other varieties he's producing. So a lot of the Kage varieties he's done, and you can see that face trait in them is pretty awesome. And then Oya, again, not to be, sniffed at, Oya seems to have a very strong trait with the Kadogin. Almost seems to be just a custom to his fish. I've got a lot of Oya Asagi on site at the minute. They are a little easier to get access to than the Otsuka ones, probably because they do produce more actually in quantity every year. But again, great growth potential in them fish, superior quality beni. But let's say a different body style to them. They tend to get a little bit bulkier. Asagi naturally have, because of the Magoi genetics, a long, slender body that fills out more with age, but never gets, big power to them. But Oya seems to have tinkered with that a little bit, and they do tend to carry a little bit more power in their body. So either or of them, if you're after Asagi, you're on to an absolute winner, to be honest. There's a more interesting one, Soragoi and Ochiba. Now, these two sort of do go hand in hand, because as far as I'm aware, there's not anybody actually directly producing Soragoi as a variety. All Soragoi will come as a result of an Ochiba spawning, typically. So Yeah, I mean, for me, straight away there, just coming to mind, Ochiba, I've gone straight to Okawa, to be honest with you. He produces some pretty awesome ones that get some serious size to them as well. Body conformation, they're probably one of the best I've seen. And his Soragoi have been really good as well. And then, yeah, Afuchi is the other one that springs to mind, also known as Fukusawa Koi Farm. Now, Afuchi's coloration is very different. You really do get that nice sort of red glow to the pigmentation on them. And again, he will have Soragoi as a result of breeding Ochiba. But yeah, either two of them farms for me are probably top hitters on that. Obviously, there's plenty of others out there, but we're talking my sort of preferences for those varieties. And then, yeah, straight follow on to that, Chagoi. So, yeah, again, pump straight away for me. We're talking, I say Marido. Marido is a popular choice. My absolute preferred choice for Chagoi is Marihiro. And Marseille is probably the other top choice out there. Now, for those that don't know, Marseille and Marihiro are actually brothers. So this is the Hirasawa family. You've got Yoshiyuki Hirasawa that runs the main Marseille farm. You got Seitaro Hirasawa, the father, who's also got a farm, which is like his pension pot, and Marihiro, who is the younger son. Basically, the two brothers running their own entities. So the Marseille Chagoi is the original jumbo lineage Chagoi, the one that was the sort of the first to produce that variety, the father back in the day. And yeah, it's probably the most dominant one still. But my issue with them is that although they're huge, very jumbo potential in them, massive fish. For me, it's always been an issue with Marseille has been the head strength and the bone structure. So I see a lot of them out there that achieve this huge size, but many of you have probably witnessed this, is where the head looks too small, and that is an integral part of a bone structure. There is that the setup of that isn't right to carry all this weight and size that they gain. So, and on that topic, that does seem to be something that's changed. So the ones I've currently got in Nisai, grown from Tosai last year, the minute they arrived, I remember saying in the videos, the heads look different. Something has changed in that breeding setup there, which is really profound. And I'm seeing the results of that in the Nisai now really, really well. And it's exciting that he's potentially done that, because they are the best Chagoi out there. If that's the case, then he's corrected these bone structures. I think they'll be untouchable. But Marihiro, first time I went to Marihiro, being the brother, and I'm looking in his pond, and all of a sudden these Chagoi were just jumping out at me, and it was they were Nisai, they weren't big in body, but what I noticed was this huge difference in bone structure. This big sort of head, triangular sort of frame with that taper. And I just sort of said to him, I said, are these, your brother's lineage? And he went, yeah, that's what I started with, but I've tinkered with it and wouldn't go into any more detail than that. And yeah, still to this day, as far as big Chagois I've seen, he doesn't produce many of them, I will say that. But when he gets them big, the heads and bone structure setups on them are untouchable, in my opinion. And he gets some nice variations of colour as well. We're also seeing now, however, which is very interesting, the sort of development of the silver fox and mango lineage. I believe it's the mango lineage these have been coming from at Sakai. So, yeah, on my last visit there, seeing, Nisai Chagois, and my God, they were insane. Colour, superb. The scalation and the body was just out of this world. So if they're off that mango line, there's some serious genetics in there. So they're one to watch. But in the meantime, for me personally, Marihiro, Marseille are the ones to be at for Chagoi for sure. So yes, and then here's Douglas Kohaku, an evening to you, buddy, as well. Yeah, this one's hard because there's just so much choice. And this really does just come down to, personal preference. Now, I've always, in Kohaku, preferred the real intense beni. That's one for me that just has a massive impact. Just bear with me. Throat's drying out. Yeah, massive impact for me visually. That's what I like in Kohaku. It's not, and that's just a preference. You've got all the different beni types going on. And that's not saying either is good or bad. It's just literally my preference. So when you're talking that type of beni, you are going to the select few. So Sakai has various different, amongst all the different parent sets, different beni types, to be honest with you, but will produce that colour. But the real heart and sort of starting block of that colour was Dainichi, and a particular Dainichi lineage called Kagura. This is a really, really famous strain that then the offshoot of Dainichi. So back in the day, from the father Minoru Mano, you've got the Dainichi Obi Kai. So these big, what are now big hitting breeders who were trained under the father at Dainichi and basically carried this strain. A lot of them had this strain. The Dainichi beni in general is this intense, super intense, lustrous beni. Kagura just sort of took it up a couple of years. And yeah, to this day, as far as I'm aware of, Nogami, it's the foundation. He had the Kagura lineage, and Mariyama as well. So two profound places, and you can see that trait in there. But then you've also got the likes of Marudo that had Dainichi as its foundation and training. So that beni type is the one for me. I do love Nogami Kohaku. I think they're absolutely superb. It's still a small farm. It's again a place where I've sort of grown up with, and yeah, they just punch way above the size of operation that they are, and I just believe it comes down to, you know, that knowledge, that pedigree that he's got. Hisato, the father, 16, 17 years it was as an apprentice at Dainichi before he took over the farm. I mean, that's just incredible numbers. So yeah, for me, it's you're talking that sort of Dainichi and the breeders around it. Although separate to that, I would put Hoshikin in that mix for me as well. Hoshikin Kohaku are superb, and he's got a very unique pattern style, which is something he clearly enjoys and has worked into his lineage as well, because it's so consistent. And again, what I like with Hoshikin, although there's a lot of high-end fish there, he what he produces quality-wise for the sort of mass market, I think he's kind of untouchable in that sector, because you've got body quality, you've got size potential, skin absolutely superb, but the patterns he produces in those cheaper fish for the mass market, I think, are way above and beyond what most other farms can do for the kind of price points that he hits. So yeah, that'd be my run. Obviously Dainichi, as I said, that beni, and then Kohaku are something else, but that's not attainable for everybody, albeit we're going to get the video done soon. But we've managed to get the Dainichi Kohaku this year that have gone out to a lot of dealers already and still shipping out at price points that are going to make them super accessible, which is always nice to do. Matthew, how? Evening, Matt. Momotaro Koi fan, we'll be sourcing a Tosai from them. Yes, already have. Just got to get them shipped home, to be honest with you. On my last trip, I was lucky. I bought a pond of Kohaku and also handpicked through another pond with some Sankyo and Kohaku in there as well. So quite nice to get back into them again. It's another fascinating lineage, very different in what it sort of produces. As one of the big three, you know, Momotaro, Sakai, Dainichi. Momotaro is very different. You know, the pedigrees, the whole brand is built. It's super jumbo, really. You know, the whole meter Go-Sanke is like a standard thing at Momotaro. It's crazy, and it's what they've been built off the back of, and they're super fast growing. So yeah, it'd be nice to have some of them back in, but they'll be here soon enough. That's an interesting one. With all this cold weather, how can I keep my bacteria in my Easy Pod alive? Right, so with the cold weather, your bacteria isn't dying. Your bacteria is just basically becoming very, very inactive. So don't worry about it dying, but you've just got to bear in mind that your filter is in a state of hibernation if you just left at ambient temperatures. So don't worry about that. You know, the biofilm is still there. You're just not getting the performance from it. That's why you've got to be very careful you know, on the warmer days, not to add in or, you know, start feeding more than you have been, because, you know, you've got to really slow everything down as well, feeding to an absolute bare minimum and try and keep it as consistent as you can. And if the pond's operating at that, say, just be careful that you don't get that warm weather spike, the fish come up and you instantly double or treble the amount of food, because the bacteria is not going to multiply fast enough to come and correct that issue. So absolutely no issues with where your pond will be at, but you just got to play it to where it is. And like I say, don't go too wild on anything with that one. Michael Piggott, evening, mate. With carp pox is heat related. Yes, because carp pox is a viral illness. So generally, yes, when it's warm and their immune system's absolutely firing on all cylinders, if they've got carp pox, it tends to clear up and the virus clears up naturally. They fight it off. But when it becomes cooler and their immune system's not firing as well, it's when it's sort of become more susceptible and the symptoms can come out in the fish. Generally, you know, in 90% of the cases, you see it clear up in the heat. Over all the years I've done this, I've only ever had 2 fish that I can recall that even in the extreme heat, it didn't clear up. One was a Sanke. I remember it now. We even had it in like 28 degrees and it was not budging. The body was just absolutely covered. Crazy to see. But yeah, carp pox is a strange one, very unsightly stuff. But, you know, it's in most cases, it's completely harmless. So if you have got it, say, heat will help. And you do expect to see it more in cold water. So I hope that helps you, buddy. Paul Warren, will you be doing any more of your online auctions? Yes, but to be honest with you, we've had a lot going on since the Christmas break. So we're just getting organised behind the scenes to get back to it with some consistency. So rather than doing it on off and not, you know, being consistent with it, we're just going to get everything arranged. And yeah, we're working on it at the minute. So I suspect we'll be back towards the end of this month with the first one, and then on from there. But looking forward to getting back to it. Right. So I'm in the live questions now at the minute. Question: now you've been to Japan, do you think the price is going to go up in the spring? I presume are we meaning on fish there or on the actual trip itself? Because the fish, if we're talking fish prices in most breeders don't change from one year to the next. It's always external factors that change prices, especially landed, you know, in countries outside of Japan. So freight rates, you know, still causing havoc there. Exchange rates are another big one as well. And yeah, a lot of the breeders have stayed consistent with a lot of prices for years. In fact, it does actually surprise me that they never do really seem to change the price. And if some of them have, it's such a big deal. You know, the guys are so apologetic when you go to see them, you know, to get your order in or whatever it is you're doing. So yeah, from that respect, in the other sort of and the higher end of koi keeping, prices, yeah, I mean that's changing and all the time. We'll just say they're going up, yes, because demand never seems to go down for those fish, to be honest. And yeah, in the auctions, it's always competitive. That's the mechanism a lot of these breeders set up, and it does set a benchmark for what goes off. One example I can give you is I've actually managed to get hold of some proper Sakai mango karashi goi, the proper karashi, and I've known this is something that's been going on behind the scenes since my trip back in October, but Kentaro was waiting before he set a price to see what had happened with the price of them in the auctions. So you think sort of fair play, but it just changes and tints everything. So yeah, managed to get them, but I think I mentioned it's the single most expensive box of fish I've ever purchased. Absolutely crazy amount. But hey, if you want them, you've got to do it, and I think that'll be great to have around the place. So yeah, and if it's on costs of the trip, no, we're hoping, you know, from a trip perspective, now as sort of tourism's open back up, we just need to see more flights coming back on before that comes down, because ticket prices are at a record high. Obviously, it's a longer journey now because you can't fly over Russia. But yeah, it's they are pretty damn expensive at the minute. But as soon as we get more volume, more airlines flying, I know BA come back to the table in November and stuff like that, you should hopefully start to see ticket prices coming down on that one. Shirley, have you entered into the All Japan Koi Show later this month? Yes, I've got 2 fish myself entered, not gone too crazy this time because it's been more about the customers, to be honest. Customers' fish, all in all, I don't know the exact numbers. I think there's quite a lot, to be honest with you, some absolutely top level entries as well that I'll be hoping compete for some serious prizes. But yeah, the 2 myself got a Momotaro Kohaku Tosai one the other day, and a male Kajaku from Wada that I secured at Narita's last event. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, competitiveness there is absolutely crazy, but it's good fun. And when you do win something, it's nice to know you've competed at the absolute highest level as well. So fingers crossed, and yeah, good luck to all the customers who have entered, and anybody else out there who's entering fish as well. Right, what else have we got? Perrin Williams, sorry, back to the variety one. There's a good one. I think for me, possibly Marihiro is the guy that reigns supreme on this one. I was going to say Otsuka to begin with, and Otsuka does make some very nice Kiyotsuri. What I tend to find is that it's harder to maintain the yellow color when they come back, because it's naturally wanting to deepen all the time. So it becomes more, you get deep yellow, then starts to turn more orange. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to put Marihiro above him. Marihiro's also really delivered on the size, phenomenally well. He's got some absolute monsters swimming around that round pond, and they do really tend to maintain the yellow color pretty well. So we'll go with Marihiro on that one for sure. Martin Clark's evening, buddy. How you doing? Best Kajaku, and any chance you getting any secured for you to go on? Yeah, this one is undisputed. Omasako say they've come from being the Shirotsuori specialist to starting on Kajaku, and then just absolutely dominating the variety. And they've really done for Kajaku what they did for Shirotsuori as well, in rectifying a load of these sort of natural genetic problems that they have. So they've corrected the body. Kajaku, just like Shirotsuori, tended to have a very dumpy bone structure, and you could get that gut. It was really, really hard to manage, and so they were not getting size, and this dumpy bone structure and everything together made them, a tough variety. So, they rectified all that with Shiro, and now they've done it with Kajaku, producing monstrous Kajaku with the most quality. So yeah, fingers crossed. I've sort of laid some foundations, hoping to get my hands on some of them to grow this year, because they do grow like stink as well. So they're pretty good fun. I've got to mention in there as well, Kunishi is probably for me a real top Kajaku breeder as well. Again, doing some remarkable things with the variety. It's just not really possible to get their fish in the UK, as far as I'm aware, because of agreements they've got with the European market. So, but no, for me anyway, Omasako, the king of that one for sure. So yes, there we go. Sorry, Koi, thoughts on RO, Ricky? Advantages, disadvantages. Yeah, so for me, again, we're just gonna, my whole keep it simple mantra, RO is never going to fit into that bracket and criteria for me. I think that you've got the issues of adding instability, and I would also question this. This is my angle on it. I know a lot of people out there run it, and I'm not saying it's bad or wrong or anything like that. If you've got the dedication, time, and everything to give to it, and you feel like it's giving you some sort of advantage, then great. I think how I've sort of put it and said it before is the way to really look at this is that is, if you're looking at a list of potential problems, and let's say, because we're only looking at RO, presumably looking at growth, the whole thing that soft water is what does it. I don't buy into that concept. However, if that's what the route you're going down and you want to try chasing TDS numbers and things like that, then obviously RO is the route. RO will produce you that purer water, which will help obviously combat against, you know, the sort of water problems that we've spoke about, although we can't just use pure RO. But yeah, for me, I think if you're looking at it thinking this is the key to unlocking the serious growth in fish or whatever, there's a huge other list that I would be looking at. And I believe most people probably aren't ticking the boxes on that list before they get into that point of adding that layer of complication to your pond and to koi keeping. So for me personally, I see the results I achieve without using RO, just using normal purified mains water. And there's no justification in there for me for adding these layers of complexity and potentially vulnerability into your system. So like I say, I'm not either way. If it's something you want to do, then it's not something that's, going to be, unless you manage it incorrectly, causing you massive problems. You just have to stay on top of it, and running low KHs and things like that. Again, it's something I struggle to keep KH in the water because of the amount of acid being produced. And you can run it, but I also see how quickly ponds can fall off the cliff as well. But the big thing with it is, if you're running it, is to have that stability, have the good system, maintain it, and keep on tolerating it. You really have got to monitor it. But for me, it's not a route I'll be going down anytime soon. So yeah, always a good debate, that one. And like I say, if it's what you want to do, you feel it's right for you in your hobby, then go for it. But it just doesn't, my brand, my style of koi keeping, RO is not something that fits into it. Never delved into it, and have no plans to either. For me, I would rather people learn, first and foremost, about genetics, picking the right fish, feeding. For me, food is the biggest, if we're targeting this around growth, food is the biggest factor in fish growth. I will not have anyone tell me otherwise with that. It impacts and influences so much, and learning how to feed properly to get the length and most importantly, get the body volume is the skill that you want to have. And then in order to do that, even when you learn the technique, you then got to learn how to manage the environment around it, the system, and loads of other factors to help, keep the appetite and everything in check. So yeah, I believe I have actually seen you've installed a new system. So yeah, it'd be great to see how you get on with it and see if it, impacts you in the right way. And like I say, if you're out there and you think it's the right choice for you, go for it. It's not like one of these big wrongs or rights or an absolute no. It's just really down to personal preference on this one. And my preference is to avoid the complexity of it. But like I say, if you're up for it, then happy days. Right, let me get that one off. Can't believe we're 43 minutes in already. It's absolutely crazy. Right, just bear with me. There's another variety one. How about Akamatsu? Yeah, straight away there for me, Otsuka, hands down. They come and actually as a byproduct of his Asagi lineage. And again, they've got all those qualities, that face characteristic and everything. When you see one of his prime examples from that, you won't look anywhere else. They're absolutely top draw. And we see it when he tends to enter one into the auction most years, one of his better ones, and they always fetch considerable money. There's pretty big demand there for Otsuka Akamatsubas. Just bear with me, folks. That one's actually cropped up a couple of times. Keisha Sui. So yeah, Keisha Sui, we're probably more talking Ayawakaba here, because you sort of get the Keisha Sui looking varieties from Ayawakaba, but ultimately that's what they're being spawned from. And yeah, for me, I tend to have Marasaka ones quite a lot. Really happy with the growth on them. The main producer of Ayawakaba / Keisha Sui was Yamanaka Oya. However, and this was quite interesting, I think I've mentioned this before, I actually said to him, I called them quiche sui in his presence, and he was not happy. He says, no, Ayawakaba is not quiche sui, although shisui is part of its makeup and its production. So for us, it does ultimately produce fish which look like a quiche sui, and you probably would deem it, because Ayawakaba, as a generally, for me, have a different sort of pattern appearance than a quiche sui. But ultimately, that one variety, or both varieties, if you call it that, are coming from the same parent set. So yeah, personally, Marasaka would be my choice for those as it stands. And then another one that was just in there, just to quite, what are your thoughts on quiche sui? Yeah, I really like them. You know, I've got a batch this year. They do suffer with the typical shisui traits of darkening, which can really let them down. But when you get one of them looking on point, they look absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, that's great. That's a good question, actually. Eden Koi, Pond and Garden. Ricky, question away from Koi, and on a personal note, how many hours do you put in a day to stay on the top of your game? Yeah, that is a great question. To be honest with you, these that I have, a lot. I'm trying more and more these days to balance family life as well, because I'm finding that more and more important for me as things and sort of time goes on. Don't want to miss that time with the kids. But I mean, Christ, if we start, you know, back in the early days of Koi Wholesale, you can't count hours. And the thing is as well, it's not the physical hours that you work in, you know, because it all just merges. When you're in this sort of business, work is life. It all becomes one thing. You try and put some, I do try and put some boundaries in place when I'm at home for sure. But, you know, most days in the summer, well, most of the time, to be honest with you, I'm a morning person anyway. So I'll be awake at 4:35 a.m. most mornings. To be honest with you, over Christmas, it's been quite nice. Since I'm back from Japan, my body clock sort of snapped into a later start. But yeah, over that period, for me, it's important to be awake at a time because I need to communicate and liaise with stuff that's going on and happening in Japan. So that time sort of hits them at a decent time out there. So we're on from that. And yeah, we just keep going from there, really. I always make time to take the kids to school because the wife hates that job. So yeah, get them dropped off. But then, yeah, it's flat out all the time. But weekends, I sort of ring fence a bit more, although I always generally up checking the fish and into something because there's always something going on, and you can't. For me personally, I don't feel like you can rest, especially when you've got to a certain point as well. But we're just I'm very, very, always very enthused and super passionate about what I do. So for me, yeah, a question like that, sort of when I just saw it, it sort of sandbagged me a little bit, because it's not a case of counting hours when you enjoy what you do. It's achieving the goals that are sort of set and the ambitions that I've got, fulfilling the ideas that I've got as well. And ultimately, you do what it takes. However, over the years, I've been one of the worst people for managing me in all that, to be honest with you, which is important. Anybody out there who's in business watching this or just starting up, you know, taking personal care is something, you know, I'd really advise you to put top of the pile, because I do tend to work to the point where I end up burning out a little bit. And that's a cycle I've been trapped in for a lot of years, which I am, you know, every year now working on more and more to keep a better balance. And it's also important, you know, I've got an absolutely fantastic team around me now, which is growing all the time. And, you know, everybody does their bit to keep all this working and functioning. And you really can't grow it and stay on top without having good people around you. That bit is absolutely impossible. So, yeah, great question there. But I think the biggest thing in all that, the hours, it's the passion that helps me to stay on the top of my game. And if that ever went away, I think you would see a massive decline in everything. And then the passion of the team, you know, Chris is super passionate. My old man at the fish house, you know, he's been doing this for longer than anyone I can think of. And he still loves, you know, just being with the fish, prattling around with the fish, whatever it is. He sells fancy goldfish as well, you know, just into it all in a big way. And it's the biggest driver, but it has to be. It's a tough and it's intense job. Although it's amazing to do something you love every day, there's still all the downfalls and pitfalls, and ultimately it is a business. So that side all needs looking after. So the answer is a lot, but for me, the most important thing is that passion is there as that driver, and that's what keeps pushing things along. Me naturally as well, I want to see things improve in the industry. And that is, to be honest with you, where a lot of these ideas, where the idea for Koi Talk spawned from. A lot of the other ideas I've got cooking away up there. Even this stuff on YouTube came from, it'd be quite easy for me to be sat at home tonight and every other night. But what we wanted to do with the video content and everything else was sort of give back from the success I've been having in the industry, but just to improve everything overall. I believe the generation I'm at, there's a whole new generation of koi keepers come through and sort of educating and teaching them the sort of best practice to be the most successful koi keepers. I feel dead passionate about, and that's something, bad advice, and not only bad advice, the wrong sort of mindset in people's ears, the wrong voices can put people off koi keeping. And if people coming in aren't successful, all we do is see them leave. And there's only so long you can keep repeating that cycle before it has a profound impact on what we're doing. And we want to see the industry grow. A healthy, thriving, happy industry is good for everybody. Because what that means is when dealers are doing well, they're going to invest more in stock, in better products, in better koi, which then gives you a better choice and more of it. When manufacturers are doing well, they're going to hopefully invest more money in research, development for new products. That's how that whole chain works. And when it goes the other way, you get everybody sort of clam up and lock up. Times like this at the minute are one where we see people sort of clam up a little bit. I'm the opposite. I'm very sort of risk averse. That's something else I tend to have to manage as much as I can. But yeah, for me, ultimately, let's say it's about improving things, and hopefully we're well on the journey to doing that. And some of the other things we're going to bring to the fore will only keep making things better. But yeah, great question. I like that one. Right, so we'll just find a couple more. Just bear with me, folks. There's one actually. Ricky, when you buy koi from Japan, do you just stick with Tosai, do input Nisai, Sanzai, etc.? If you follow me, you'll probably find I don't tend to hold back. Koi Wholesale as a whole is bringing Tosai in, and then we're producing the Nisai and Sanzai from those Tosai that we bring in. For me, I mean, this is how I analyze this. When we're looking at Nisai and Sanzai, for me, when you're in the realms of that, especially of looking for fish of quality, there's a lot of drawbacks. So if we're looking for fish at a certain price point, for example, as a Nisai, certainly in the cheaper end of things, I believe the fish I produce are far better value and quality for what many others would buy and actually import to fulfill similar price points. Reason being is air freight is a massive difference. Even when you're buying cheap Nisai in Japan, on the cheaper end of things these days, I mean, I just had it with some fish that came in. The air freight was double the price straight away. It was the same. It was actually a little bit more than the initial cost of the fish. So when we're raising them from Tosai, we sort of missed that. I tend to think the cheaper Nisai can tend to be, I wouldn't say badly handled, but they don't often live the best of lives. So from some farms where you get them, they then need to come in and still have a lot of conditioning to be done to them, whereas when we've raised them through, that conditioning's all been done over the summertime, etc., before they're ready for a release, and it makes a really strong fish. So on the Nisai Sanzai, I tend to be, that's more in the realms of the higher end stuff that I do. It's where I focus when it's more on Nisai and Sanzai, and then they're fish that do unfortunately come at a considerable cost. With the higher end fish, I tend to go more Nisai and Sanzai at that point because they're much more predictable and reliable. Whereas with Tosai, yeah, as I've found, when we're investing heavily in young Tosai, there's just too much risk and too much shit goes wrong. So Yeah, it depends on the scenario there, but mainly for Koi Wholesale, I'm bringing in Tosai and doing the rest from there. And we buy very big batches. It'll often be a full pond buy or large numbers. So we've got the quantity there to work through to get the quality that we need out of it. But it works well for me. When you know what you're looking at, you know how to dissect a batch of Tosai, you can really get some amazing results from it, especially when you get the fish from the right place to begin with as well. So yes, one more. Alan Finlay. Hi, Ricky. Have you had any dealings with Shintaro? Are his fish up there with the big players? That's an interesting one. My take on this one is, if we're talking the big players, I would say no. How I gauge that is quite simple. I judge the big players as being the ones who are the most dominant on the show circuit, winning the major awards year on year on year. So if we're talking that, you're talking your Sakai, Dainichi, Momotaro. You then move into your specialist sort of variety breeders, i.e. Kano with Goshiki, Oyotsuka with Asagi, and things like that. Omasako with Shirotsuori and Kajaku. That's how I sort of rank things, is who's producing the most champions, best in varieties, first prize winners year on year. And Shintaro isn't a name that you see in that mix a lot, not at the highest level. Local shows, sort of like the Nagaoka, things like that, yes, there'll be wins. But even there, you often see your Maridos, Nogamis, NNDs, them guys winning the top honours every year. Shintaro fish, I mean, I've studied a lot about them. You know, it's sort of one of those breeders who stooped in the history. So Shintaro was an understudy of Toshio Sakai, the original Matsunosuke producer, and as such, his lineage was built off of that original Matsunosuke lineage. So what you've got there is that Matsunosuke bloodline was we're talking about Sanke mainly here as well. It's a big production at Shintaro. Is the Magoi lineage that was created, where Matsunosuke added Magoi blood in, and after several generations of breeding, produced a stable line. And this lineage, actually, this Matsunosuke line, did go on to produce the first Go-Sanke over 1 meter, because it created the first jumbo growing Sanke. That fish produced from that Matsunosuke lineage actually ended up at Momotaro, and they were the guys that pushed it over the line and got it over that 1 meter, then onto its grand champion win. So yeah, huge. It's a huge pedigree that's there in the fish. I just feel, and we've seen this from some of the videos that Yivo's done, to be honest with you, it needs sort of modernizing a little bit. So this Matsunosuke line that Shintaro took on, and is pretty much, the characters are all there in it. You've got the incredible quality of skin. That is one thing there that is phenomenal. And as such, it's the huge Matsunosuke trait. And they are jumbo growing. There's no, these things grow, the 90 plus and beyond very consistently and regularly. So no issues with any of that stuff. I think for me, where it needs modernizing is the body is still too traditional in that Matsunosuke sense. So this Magoi lineage produces a more slender frame. Now, what we've become accustomed to and used to in this day and age is the Sakai body. That set a new benchmark. And what Sakai do is this huge volume. And Dainichi probably as well, to be honest with you. Huge body height, huge power all round. And as well as then getting the big jumbo sizes as well. And I think that's led to the Shintaro fish being not as competitive against that, because back in the day, probably it was the most prominent bloodline. Just hasn't been modernized and updated to suit the sort of tastes and styles of the modern day. So you've still got all that quality jumbo potential. Don't get me wrong, they fill out. So you'll see them as Tosai and Nisai. They look incredibly slender and probably more comparable to Asagi a lot of the time. And they do fill out with age. So volume does come. And, at 90, the volume will be considerable. But when you stack that up against, say, a Sakai or Dainichi fish of 90 cm, that Dainichi or Sakai is probably going to look 5 cm plus more or bigger because of the difference in body volume. So, yeah, I really rate the fish. It's also nice to still have these lineages kicking around, whereas you still get a lot, and I respect the guy a lot for having stayed with it for so long, because we just see a lot of these old lineages that have these traits that people love. If you're not everybody is a big fan of the Sakai body, so if you're not, this is a great another option for you, because like I say, there's heaps of quality there. But we just see these older lineages in the end sort of fizzle out. It's still being that Matsunosuke line is still in development at Isao and Ishikigoi with Toshio Sakai. That's was the producer, but even his brother, the Yamamatsu operation in Niigata, even they've tried tinkering with it to sort of get more body volume growing in there without affecting those extreme skin qualities that they have. So yeah, like I say, I think from Yivo's videos, there is some Sakai fish now at Shintaro that they're trying to introduce as oyagoi, and see, it could be an interesting one, because if that ends up being done successfully and you have those qualities then coupled with your sort of body power of Sakai, things could get really, really interesting there. But it'll be a interesting one to see if that can be done, and this still the style of the Shintaro Sanke can be maintained. Just to sort of end, one bit I can sort of comment on that was the NND Sanke, because I watched this go from a pretty pure lineage of Sudazo, an old lineage from sort of back in the day, to which was, again, it was restricted because these things didn't grow beyond sort of 70 was pushing the top end of it, but there were fish with extreme quality and a very delicate sumi pattern, which was very popular. And I think it was 2009, I think I've spoke about this before, when a Sakai Sanke was introduced into that lineage. And you get the difference in the offspring. You see some of those original Sudazo traits, then you see, more the Sakai blood coming through and having more of an impact. And ultimately, it's just produced a modern day generation of then now NND Marusho Sanke, but you see very, very few of those original Sudazo sort of traits. Every now and again, you get one of them fish crop up and you go, oh, yeah, wow. But yeah, it did change things. So it'll be interesting to see where things go with that one. But just in answer to your question, yes, the fish are superb quality. And this is the thing, you've got, these different lineages offer, and it just all comes down to personal taste, whether it's for you or not. But yeah, regards the big players, I mean, the big players, and this is it, you've got breeders who do produce extreme quality, but these guys who I consider the big players are just that cut above in what they're doing, and like I say, producing the fish to the modern taste. And it's the modern taste that's ultimately driving the sort of what the judges want and see, and then ultimately then the fish that are winning the prizes. So I hope that answers that one all right for you, Alan. And yeah, on that one, folks, I've got to say, actually, I've just seen a question there. Quite let's follow on a little bit, digging into it a bit more. So, home, garden, and RC flying things. Ricky, what has it got you into the wholesale side of the koi business? Yeah, it pretty much comes back to what I was saying about wanting to change things, to be honest. So, from when I got into koi back in the early years of it, I very quickly got a taste and a passion for the higher end fish. And for me, it very quickly became my goal that I wanted to be a high end koi dealer. And that was the passion driving it at that point. I'm talking, I'll have been young, probably 12, 13 at that point. This was just lodged in the forefront of my mind. And this is while I was serving, I call it my apprenticeship at my dad's shop. So he worked in retail for about 17 years all in all. I served a very good shift in it as well. So probably, I don't know what, about 9-10 years all in all from starting out as a little nipper. So yeah, obviously that gave me a big understanding of that side of things, and then doing the behind the scenes business with my dad of where the koi came from. And that was initially a mix of, we obviously, there was a couple of wholesalers at the time, but what it was already then, that those wholesalers, it seemed like it was a choice of either you put up with the shit they served up. Basically, it was just very mediocre koi, kept in conditions that weren't conducive to keeping the body well or the color condition, and you got charged quite the premium for having those fish quarantined, as I say, which was generally just, you know, leaving them for 2 weeks before reselling them and making sure there was no parasites on them. And if you wanted to handpick, you got charged a super premium on top of that. I mean, there was some crazy numbers. And this was, then you're looking at this thinking, well, the only other option then is to go to Japan. And from a business side, for where a lot of koi dealers are at, that's such a huge jump, because what's needed to actually do a successful buying trip in Japan and bring that stock back, it's a very different business to where one starts out and either is after a few years of trading. So I sort of looked at all this, and I carried on doing what we were doing. I'd made contact and started my relationship with Fujo at this point when I was about 13. So we were doing everything ourselves, and we'd moved house, and my dad started building the ponds, some of the ponds. It's now the Koi Wholesale facility we did together, which was a treacherous side of my childhood, that. But good fun all the same. And I mean, in the end, after a few, I eventually set up a business called Koi Growers, which I think I was about 18 at the time, 18, 19, something like that. And that was my first crack at doing high-end retail from the Koi, what is now the Koi Wholesale facilities. Not quite what they are today, but in the early stages of it. And to be honest with you, I completely fucked everything up over the course of a couple of years. I was naive in the business sense, very, very naive. But what I quickly realized was there's not actually really a business, because at this point, about 16, 17, my passion for business was growing a lot as well. And I very just quickly realized if I wanted to grow the sort of business I wanted, I wasn't going to do that exclusively selling high-end koi. It's more of a hobby business and has to stay that kind of way. So it was sort of at that point, my dad had had enough of retail. He was just tired of it. Passion was weighing in a little bit, and I knew I couldn't carry on doing what I was doing. Facilities around were just too big, and looking at that for retail, they were too big for that purpose. So, having known that this wholesale side of the industry still hadn't changed in already this point, though, probably sort of like 9-10 years I've been doing it, it was time for a mix-up. And it's exactly what we did, and really brought a lot of I would say, the retail standards and things that we were doing into that wholesale game. And started with, fish we'd been raising. I think the very first website I set up, I was offering individual fish, all individually photographed fish, probably more and to a standard that was above and beyond any retail operations at the time, but for the dealers. So the dealers could, when they're busy people, their priority is keeping the shops open, they could sit at home and literally handpick fish off of my website. So that was sort of like the thing. And then just this opening up this huge, bigger range of stock for people as well, bringing in different breeders, really focusing on quality and not just thinking, it's just wholesale. Stack them high, sell them cheap mentality was not what it was about at all. And I think probably you can see from what we do now, I think to call it just a wholesaler is probably not the right name for it, but it is the brand now. It is the name. Yes, Shirley, it did. Lovely Ginrin Kohaku. I remember. I think that was the first time we met was that fish. So, but yeah, that's how it all started. And yeah, now 11, soon to be 12 years in, I'd like to think we've changed a hell of a lot and changed the game big time on all that. And still continue to do so now with the sort of hybrid models we're doing, where we're opening fish up to you guys and feeding them back through our dealer network and stuff like that. So it never stops, but that is why I decided to get into that side of things. And ultimately now what it allows me to do is run the site as what I see it as a koi farm, just without the breeding side. So Yeah, there we go. Great question, that one, along with the last one. So that's going to be it for this evening, folks. I did promise the wife I'd be home at 15:15. I'm just about make it, and I think I'll be asleep not long after, to be honest. But yeah, auctions. There we go. Look, dinner's ready. Crikey, we're in trouble already. Again, yeah. The just to reiterate, the Takano Grow Out event, if you are still after a ticket, I believe there's about 10 left. Been a phenomenal success so far, and I thank you all for your support with that one. But if you would like one, you can head over to the Exclusively Koi website and get one of those purchased. Should be an absolutely great event, and hopefully the first of many to come. Yeah, other than that, auctions will be back soon, hopefully at the end of the month, and on again from there. And yeah, in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you next week.